We all have photographers that inspire us, and today's guest is somebody that has inspired me for years and years with his amazing music photography, but he's made some changes in his life, and he's changed what he photographs as well. We take extreme photography to new heights on this episode of Behind the Shot. Hi, welcome to another episode of Behind the Shot, the podcast where we try and get inside the mind of great photographers by taking a closer look behind one of their shots. And today's guest is somebody I've wanted to have on for a really long time. I first found out about this person on Twitter. Very active on Twitter back in the day, and he's actually not on Twitter anymore, which is kind of interesting. When I first found out about my guest today, he was a well-known music photographer, and he did something called Follow Friday that a lot of people on Twitter do. And part of the fact that I have any followers on Twitter at all, the fact that I was interviewed by a couple of websites, is all actually due to this guy because he mentioned me on Follow Friday, and people found out about me. So I owe him that big time. But not only that, there are photographers that we find in our careers that inspire us, right? Whatever it is, it may be the type of photography they do. It may be the way that they edit it, whatever it is. But today's photographer that I've got on as a guest inspires for life reasons well beyond photography. So I got to say welcome and thank you so much for coming on to my guest today, Anthony D'Angio. Anthony, how are you, buddy?
It's a pleasure, Steve. Thank you so much for having me.
I'm having you on is I'm serious. This is a really big deal to me because you have been an inspiration in my photography in many, many ways. It's not just your photography. You're an amazing music photographer. We'll get into that. But you've kind of redirected your brand, what you shoot, your outlook on life, it seems like. There's a lot about you that I want to get into today. But let's start here because you have changed kind of how you approach photography. When someone comes up to you now and says, "Oh, you're a photographer. What do you photograph?"
What's my
You're
answer?
laughing because you know what I mean. How do you answer that?
I photograph life. That's pretty much how I kind of see it myself. It's very hard, and I guess to pick a field or a direction to what I do. I love photography and I love life, and I think that's kind of been the case over the past 18 months for a variety of reasons. And I think for me to be able to say that, you know, I can do anything and I can photograph anything and I'm always learning. And that's kind of how I approach my photography or how I approach anything that I do going forward. Whether that be
and that's
photography
true, actually. You can photograph anything because I've seen photographs. Obviously, your music photographs are well known, but you did, you know, ice dancing for Disney, and you've done wedding photography and promo photography, and the type of photography we're going to discuss today, which I don't want to call it travel photography. It's not travel photography. I almost want to call it extreme photography. But along with photography, when you say you photograph life, this is one of those things for me about you, right? Many people would know you from your early days on social media as Get Flexed or Flex. That brand has been retired, and your new tagline, purely from a marketing point of view, dude, brilliant, right? Your world, my eyes.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because a good friend of mine, we were talking about this documentary that I'm in the process of making, which I won't go into too much, but she said to me, "You should call it Your World, My Eyes." And I thought, no, I want to, and I guess this is where my branding and marketing background came into it. I did not want the documentary to merge with the brand. That was to do with me. Your World, My Eyes is my statement. The documentary is part of that. And I guess that's, you know, it's a big thing. And I thought about it and I thought, well, that's essentially what I'm doing. I'm trying to visualize the world. And allow people to see what I see because I'm very passionate about what I'm doing. So,
well, and again, going back to the marketing thing, that line is so inviting, right? It's intriguing. It's what? your world, I got to see this. It's one of those type things. It really is one of the brilliant taglines of all time, in my opinion. But, you mentioned you have a marketing background, and you can see that. One of the things when I do presentations on photography at photography groups, you're one of the ones I mentioned. I do a little thing at the end of, those photographers that inspire me. And I mention you. But one of the reasons I mention you to a lot of people is there's always the debate of, do you watermark your image, right? And we've all seen it everywhere.
Yeah.
And, my attitude is watermark, don't watermark. Do whatever fits for you. But if you're going to watermark, do it in a way that is well done. I mean, it's still a photo and it's graphic design, and you took the time to compose it and lay it out and make it work. And that, if people get nothing else out of today, go look at Anthony's watermarks.
the evolution of my watermarks.
Yeah, exactly. The evolution of your watermarks. The 17 watermarks. Yeah. You've worked with some big names, right? So
yes,
Nat Geo, Disney. I have the feeling, based on the shot we're going to talk about today and the type of stuff you're doing now, Nat Geo is going to be a big one.
Nat Geo.
You have not done National Geographic?
No, I wish I had.
Oh, no, well, you know what? I thought you had.
No, if I have, and it's in in the back of my mind, remind me, because no, I don't. I haven't.
Okay, well, based on what you're shooting now, they're going to be knocking on your door. There's no question. So. And people will know what I mean when I show that today's shot. Disney, you did some Disney stuff. You've done BBC. You've done CMA multiple times in Nashville. And then, of course, you've got the big cover now, Eric Church on the Rocks. Yep. Which is, there's a couple of different covers. There's the one that's in color with the black and white circle, and then there's the other one. I want to ask you someday about shooting at Red Rocks, because I love that cover.
It's beautiful. It's a stunning venue. I mean, it did help that Eric's production was set up in that way. It just created a perfect mood light for what he was trying to portray in that show, and it was just stunning. But yeah, that whole when you step into Red Rocks, you're kind of stepping into something quite surreal and ethereal. It's amazing. The history.
You got to go in the tunnel.
Sorry?
You got to go in the tunnel.
Yeah, I did.
There's a tunnel, for those people that don't know Red Rock Amphitheater in Colorado. There's a tunnel that goes from like where the dressing rooms are to the stage, and only the artists and their photographers and crew go through that thing. And it's signed by anybody who's everybody. And it's a dream of mine. It's a bucket list to go through that tunnel. So one other thing you've got going, and I want to touch on this more at the end, but you do have the documentary type project that you're doing called the Untitled.
Yes.
We'll touch on that in detail, like I say, at the end, but just give me a quick synopsis of what is the Untitled.
The reason I chose that title, and again, that was a debate with a few people, I want people to take out of that documentary that I'm making whatever they put into it, or whatever they want to take out of it. It's not a film about mountains. It's not a film about me and self-indulgent film about my journey, or being up on top of a summit. It's a film about inspiration and well, it's a film about anything really. If people want to take from it that it is about mountains and it's great and it's beautiful scenery, fantastic. Or if people delve a bit further into it and they can see the journey and they can relate to the journey, then that's great. So I wanted to keep it generic. I didn't want to call it something that was going to pigeonhole it. Again, going back to like the brand and that kind of stuff. I want to empower the people, I guess, to take from it what they want. No one may ever see it, it's not about that. I'm doing it for posterity.
If I have any say in it, people will see it, because I've gone and watched. You've got a couple of series episodes up there, and then you've got the trailer.
Yeah.
But this is the type of photography that you're doing and what we're going to talk about today. Yeah. And in this trailer, you use your drone and you get these crazy, I don't even know what to call them. They're like selfie flybys. Yeah,
they are. They are. And I tell you what, my drone doesn't like me very much.
Well, but you get these killer shots, and then you use your amazing photographic eye. In ways in this, both shooting yourself, shooting your surroundings, shooting your environment, it just hit me, shooting our world through your eyes.
Yeah.
You
tough.
Went from being a top music photographer, touring with Eric Church and doing all of the CMA stuff and BBC stuff. You went from being a top music photographer, which you still are, and you kind of reinvented and found your life slightly differently and decided, you know what? I'm going to go on this quest for mountain climbing. I'm not talking hiking, although you do that too, but mountain climbing. And what's your goal? My understanding is it's 2020.
It was. And I'm one of these people that, will chop and change. I'm continually evolving. When I got back from the Himalaya, I'll touch on it briefly, but when I got back from the Himalaya, I kind of reassessed everything. There's a lot of reasons, but at this point in time, I'm not looking at going for the summit of Everest for a lot of reasons. There's no point going into it now, but having said that, there's a lot of other things that I'm interested in doing, and that's not to say that I won't go back to that, concept. I mean, for one, it's $45,000 to summit, right. So that's going to be a big hit. So that's one reason. But
you're still climbing actively and taking pictures.
Yeah, and I will continue to, because that's something that has really, I guess, reinvigorated my passion for so many different things, not just photography but life.
Well, and that brings us perfectly into today's shot, because this was a shot that you took on an extreme hike. I mean, this is not, climbing your hill in your local neighborhood. Tell me just an overview. Where is this shot that I just brought?
Okay. That light that you see, that lit establishment over there, is a place called Tengboche Monastery. That's probably about 5 or 6 days into the hike to Everest Base Camp, deep within the Himalaya. It's okay,
and I have to ask a question, because in the written text for your documentary, you mention in the Himalaya. Is it Himalaya, or would it be in the Himalayas?
Well, actually, it's Himalaya, which I've recently discovered. We are all pronouncing it incorrectly.
Okay.
So I think it must be something to do with the origins of the word.
But you don't pluralize it when you're referring to it.
Sorry?
You don't pluralize it?
I don't think you do, to be honest. I've heard a lot of people I've been listening to and watching a lot of, climbing and documentaries on the Himalaya. And everyone who has had the experience or years of experience there tend to refer it as the Himalaya, the Himalayan mountain range. So I think it's just something that has become the norm, and people have just said it as Himalayas. It is what it is, really.
So this is way up in them.
Yeah, it's about we're talking about 4,000 meters here, which is about 13,000 feet. So
wow.
Minus 15 degrees around. I'm talking Celsius here, so probably not that much difference in Fahrenheit. And we'd hiked to that point, came through the valley where you see the clouds. That's where we came up, and arrived at the monastery there.
So the trail to the monastery is that lower cloud area on the left?
Yeah, underneath there. Now, that's one thing. The one thing about valleys in the Himalaya, they really do attract cloud, and you can almost guarantee that a certain time of the afternoon or evening, you're going to get an influx of cloud coming through. And I've seen it. It's gone from bright blue to zero visibility within the space of 20 minutes, and a drop of about 30 degrees in temperature. It's crazy. It's, the mountains have their own microclimate, which is, it's exciting, but it's also can be quite dangerous if you're not well equipped.
Well, and from a photography point of view, this is brutal, right? I mean,
yeah.
Okay, so when you hike up in here, you're staying at the monastery?
We stayed one night. Let me think. It was one night there. We have a few places we acclimatized for 2 nights, but at Tengboche we stayed one night, and then we continued on. So that was that. We usually arrived at places at around mid-afternoon, 3 or 4 p.m., and would have early nights because we'd have a 6 a.m. start for the next day, and that's essentially what it was here. But I, of course, being me, and the tagline for the whole trip, amongst the other members of the expedition, was always, "Where's Anthony?" Because, whilst everyone was playing cards or drinking tea at wherever we stopped, I would be out on a ridge or something, taking photos or flying the drone or what have you. It became the tagline of the trip, and it still is.
So how did you get to this spot?
Well, this was So this is about 4 a.m. I'd always sort of wake up. It was really hard to sleep at higher altitudes as well. So you'd have broken sleep throughout the night. And I would get up, and I think basically there is a little bit of a path across from the monastery, and it's just following the path up, which becomes a ridge. And I just thought, I'm going to keep going. And this is what I tend to do with the photos. I don't really know where I'm going, especially since I hadn't been there before. And I just thought I'd continue up until I saw some kind of nice vantage point, bearing in mind, obviously, that it was, minus 15 or whatever it was in temperature. So I didn't want to stay up for too long. I got up on top of that ridge, as you see, which probably took me about 40 minutes to get up, and sort of turned around and I thought, wow, it was just, and you kind of felt like that throughout the whole expedition. Until you've been to the Himalaya, you just don't know. It's a completely different world. You're looking at clouds, and then you're seeing peaks rising above the clouds. It's like Vegas. you can't, well, in the sense that you can't sort of imagine the scale of Vegas from a photo until you're actually there. And it's the same thing, that photo or any photos of the Himalaya, it doesn't do it justice until you're there. And I think that's one reason I kind of moved to video as well, because that gives you more depth.
Well, and the scale is one of the interesting things to me, because you do get kind of a sense from the mountains that are in the background, but you mentioned that you walked 40 minutes or so to get to this spot from the monastery. And that kind of puts in perspective, looking where the monastery is, that's a 40-minute, not just walk down a street, right? I mean, that's a 40-minute hike
in the dark.
And what's really cracking me up here is Anthony went for a hike when everybody else was sleeping.
Yeah. Well, I stayed up and took a Star Trail shot later on, and I got it wrong the first time. So I was there shooting for an hour, and I thought, oh God, another hour out here. 3 a.m. goes, 4 a.m. goes. That's me. I don't do things by halves. I refer to this as extreme photography, but I am kind of curious, because this is not the type of photography that I do for a number of reasons. One of which is 4 a.m. and I aren't friends. But with that said, when you're doing this type of photography in minus 15 Celsius at 4 o'clock in the morning, right? You got to get it right.
And not only that, but you've hiked a ridge.
Yeah.
There is risk involved. People fall, whatever. Yeah. What are, I started to say, what are the gear risks and what are the gear issues that you have here? Lenses fogging up or acclimation of your gear to the temperature. But what are all the challenges that you have from a photography point of view with being in this extreme environment?
You've got to, you've got to get it right as quickly as possible. I guess that's the thing that sits in my mind wherever I am. It doesn't have to be, 14,000 feet up, and it could be, 3,000 feet up in the Welsh mountains. Because, a mountain is a mountain. It doesn't matter how high it is. It's still going to attract cloud. It's going to attract an interesting change of weather really quickly as well. So it is about making sure you get it right. And I think that just comes with experience. You kind of get a feel for how long you need to set your exposure, set your shutter, because you're shooting in bulb mode at these kinds of time all the time anyway. So you kind of estimate, 20 seconds, 1 minute, 3 minutes, what have you. And you get used to knowing what that works. It doesn't always work. But well, I was very lucky with this one. It was my first shot and I got it right. But
what is the exposure on this? Do you know?
This was F11, 3 minutes at 400 ISO.
Interesting. What body and lens?
That was, this was the 5D SR, with a 16 to 35 millimeter Mark III, the new one that came out. And the reason for that, was 2 weeks early, I smashed my 11 to 24 in Snowdon, by dropping it on a rock, and I didn't have my wide angle lens. So I wanted to hire an 11 to 24, but they didn't have any in stock, and they gave me the 16 to 35 Mark III, and it is a stellar lens. And when you add that to a 50 megapixel body like the 5DSR, you are going to get a shot like this. Do you wish that you had the 11? I mean, No.
Was this at 16?
No. Good question. I can tell you, I've got the EXIF there. Yes, it was exactly 16 millimeter.
So do you wish, that you had more width with the 11?
No, because that's one thing. I love the 11 to 24 millimeter lens. I use it as much as I can, but it is a very
heavy though,
lens.
Really heavy.
It's very heavy, but it's a very difficult lens to shoot with because you need a sense of perspective. Because if I shot this at 11 millimeters, those mountains would not look as majestic. They would fade into the distance. So it's one of these lenses where you have to have something in the foreground to create a sense of perspective or something, because it's a tough lens to shoot at. You need huge mountains to have it look like there's something significant in the background. It's more of a foreground lens, really.
So when you're shooting with the 16 to 35, the brand new one, the Mark III, which I hear is insanely sharp and appears to be.
Yeah.
What do you do to acclimate your gear? To prevent lens fog and all that type of a thing.
Well, that's an interesting one, because I would have to say that has only happened to me. You've been following what I've been doing, and you've seen how often I've been out. The fogging up of lenses probably happened to me. I could count it on one hand how many times that's happened to me. It's never really been an issue. Nor has the temperature with the actual camera working. I've never had any. I was shooting at minus 26 on Everest Base Camp, and it was fine. There was no, the camera didn't seize up or anything. The batteries were fine. Occasionally I get a notification on my drone RC that says, warm up the batteries because, they're well below the temperature. But I still fly it, and it still flies. So I think they kind of err on the side of caution when it comes to things like that. It's never been an issue for me, I have to say.
When you're in this position in the mountains, when I first saw this shot, I thought to myself, one of the neat things to me about photography is the photographer's eyes, right? We tell people when they go, "Oh, you have a nice camera." Cameras don't take pictures, photographers take pictures, that old line. But that to me is the beauty of photography. So when I picture myself sitting here, again, not going to happen, but when I imagine in my mind that I'm sitting on this ridge, there's 17 different compositions that you could do, right? You could put that monastery in the lower right third. Yep. You could put that monastery in the lower left third. You could do some kind of a, central horizon line. There's a lot of things that you could do. When you're sitting up there, what was your, in your head at least, your goal with this composition? Why this angle of all the angles?
As I mentioned before with the valley, I was waiting for that cloud to come through. And unfortunately, when I shot it, it wasn't at the peak. As I was coming back down the ridge, the cloud just enveloped that, and it looked a lot more dramatic. So I probably would have had an even more dramatic shot than I have. But that was the intent, was to capture the monastery within the frame, nicely as it sits below that beautiful mountain. I wouldn't even know what that mountain's called. But when that fog or cloud came through, not fog, when it came through that ridge, it was absolutely stunning. And I just couldn't sit out there for another 5 minutes for it. I had actually seen a lot of shots, and this was kind of a goal of mine, to get an amazing shot of Tengboche, because it is a stunning place. There are so many different places you can shoot the monastery from. I just happened to go up here because it was a lot more accessible, and at 4 a.m, you don't want to mess about. But I had seen a lot of photos, some shrouded in mist, and I said to myself before I even left for Nepal, I want to get a killer shot of Tengboche Monastery, because it is a beautiful monastery and it's a beautiful location. And I came out with, probably one of my favorite landscape shots. I guess it is up there. I think it is probably the best one I've ever taken, just for the color and the fact that it was difficult to get in a short amount of time. And
it looks like this is one of those ones that looks like a painting at the beginning of a movie, a painting backdrop. It's so amazing. Now, I've seen the Star Trail one. Actually, I saw also the one you had of the Matterhorn.
Yes.
With the Star Trails, which is absolutely amazing. But this shot is so beautiful. My last question really is, what did you do to this in post? And what do you use? Are you a Lightroom user?
Sorry? No, I don't use
Lightroom user?
No, I don't use Lightroom. I never have. I use Camera Raw. Canon's Camera Raw, to to do the initial stuff and then go into Photoshop. But what I've found, and I can say that, I can vouch for that even more so now that I've been upgraded to the 1DX Mark II through insurance. The 1DX Mark II and the 5DSR are the only two cameras I've seen that when you look at the shots on the back of the camera, you are blown away by the detail that's there. I mean, obviously the 5DSR is a 50 megapixel camera, so it's got a lot of details. That I don't think I cropped that too much, but it's incredible. It minimizes your post work a lot, and I think that's one thing I found with the 5DSR. What did I do to it? I mean, it was just adjusting bits and pieces in Camera Raw. The exposure and the temperature a little bit. I wanted to make it a little bit warmer than having it look too cold, because the monasteries there gave a nice warm light. I wanted the whole photo to depict that a bit. Dodging and burning, you've seen my workflow process, kind of a stripped down version of that. There's not a lot to work with in terms of light when you're talking about that time of morning. So it's not like a stadium shot where you can really bring out the lights and things like that I've done in the past with concert photos and almost made them 3D like, is from what people have said. So it's just, I guess, trying to keep it as real as possible. And the thing is with the Himalaya, it is a mount. It is you said painting. It's like looking up at a painted sky. It's stunning. They're not mountains that you will see anywhere else in the world. I've been to the
depth.
Alps.
And maybe it's the 5DSR.
Yeah,
but
that's part of it.
The depth in this image is, you feel like you could reach through a canyon.
I'm glad. I mean, it is, and when you look at it, I don't know if I sent you the high-res shot, but when you look at it at 100% crop, you are seeing formations on the rock. I mean, the 5DSR is a great camera.
Well, I can't say enough how much I appreciate your not only sharing the image with us, but kind of your whole experience around taking it, because this is extreme photography. And this is the type of photography that most people will never get a chance to do. But a lot of what you do or go through to take this type of a shot can help the guy, photographing his kid play soccer, just in understanding by really examining this location and timing and all of that type stuff. If people want to know more about you, what's your website?
I've gone completely with my name now. It's anthonydangio.com.
Okay. And of course you're on Facebook
as the Anthony Dangio, and Instagram
as well. Yeah. The Anthony Dangio.
Yeah.
And then you're on YouTube, and that's where people can go look at the trailers.
Yes.
For the Untitled film documentary, which I kid you not, when you see the video and the photos and the flybys of his drone in this thing, you'll be hooked. You'll actually be like me. You'll be waiting for this movie to come out as a full movie.
Thank you.
Amazing. And if anybody from Nat Geo is watching, you need to call this guy.
Well, all thing in good time. I believe things happen when they're supposed to happen. So, I think that's how I've changed my perspective on life. And I think everything is happening at the right time. And at the moment I am where I'm supposed to be. So I'm happy with that.
Well, it's awesome to see you. Thank you so much for coming on. I will, as always, be following you online because you inspire me each and every day. So to my guest for today, Anthony Dangio on Behind the Shot, thank you so much for coming on. I'm your host, Steve Brazel. Make sure you join us for each and every episode of Behind the Shot. You can subscribe on the Google Play Store or on iTunes, whatever it might be, whatever your podcast location is of choice, or whatever your podcast app is. This is the podcast where we try and get inside the mind of great photographers by taking a closer look behind the shot. We'll see you next time.